All right, joining me now is Colonel Rob Maness. We still have Michael Reagan, Ronald Reagan's son. How would Ronald Reagan respond to what's happening on college campuses today? Perhaps some old black and white video footage from back in the day will show us. We'll get it straight from his son, Michael Reagan, in just a minute. Joining me and then Dr. Rob Lindstedt on this piece of legislation that just passed the House on anti-Semitism that seeks to criminalize someone that says that the Jews killed Jesus. Well, that's a matter of record, but it wasn't just the Jews. It was the Romans, it was you, it was me. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. It was the sin of mankind. For God, what's it say, John 3:16? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. He laid down his life as a ransom for sinners, for all who would believe, right? So we all put Christ to the cross, but it wasn't just the Jews. It was every one of us. But, yeah, the Jews were wanting to do that along with the Romans. We got to correct this legislation, that's for sure. We don't want to have anti-Semitism or people, stalking folks and targeting. No, but I think there are already laws in the books for these things, number one. But number two, what is this ultimately about? I think it's ultimately about trying to drive a wedge between the Christians and the Jews. They don't want us working together. They want to try to create hostility between the two groups. I think that's what this is really all about. We'll check with Dr. Rob Lindstedt on that. Joining me now is Colonel Rob Maness. Colonel, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Good evening, Brannon. Thanks for having me on.
Great. Thank you for making yourself available. All right. So I got a communication today from one of our sources who said that there's a company this source works with, a successful company based in California. We're talking about investments recently, and in turn, turns out that China, I'm paraphrasing this and rereading this to keep from any identities, Chinese shipping firm that he deals with said that in the past 15 years, he has never seen anything like what's going on now. Apparently, they're buying up very large amounts of copper, massive amounts of copper, and sending it over there to China by the tanker load. So, what are the implications of this, if any? What is this all about, do you think, Colonel?
Well, for those that are closely observing open source reporting about China in the last month or so, there's been a lot of reporting recently about China stockpiling materials and stockpiling goods and everything. And Brandon, it's been pretty common knowledge in the military community that a lot of senior leadership, such as General Mike Minahan, one of the Air Force 4-stars in charge of a U.S. Combined Command and an Air Force Major Command, thinks the Chinese are going to try to force Taiwan to reunify with mainland China here in the near future. General Minahan said that he thought it would happen by 2025, and we're well into 2024 at this point. So he may be right. A lot of the other experts say it might be 2027, but copper is an interesting material because it's needed quite prolifically in the weapons manufacturing business. Everything from your copper jacketed bullets to components internal to high explosive anti-tank rockets and artillery rounds to the wiring and precision guided munitions, wiring in aircraft, wiring in submarine ships. All of those things require massive amounts of copper, and we know that China has been on a very large defense buildup and increasing its forces. Its Navy outnumbers ours. They're in a major build out of a large number of new intercontinental ballistic missiles and the launch systems that put those missiles over their targets, which are obviously the United States and its resources and allies and bases throughout the Pacific and the rest of the world. So that would be needed to do that, and it matches up with what we've been seeing in other open source reporting about other types of materials that they're stockpiling in very large quantities, enough to be noticed in the supply chain system by not just myself, but other press outlets and reporters that monitor these kinds of things.
So where do you think we are still in this timetable? We have other guys that are saying by this October, by this fall, China will move against Taiwan. I know it's just, we don't have a crystal ball, but what does your gut tell you?
Well, the Biden administration has put the United States, taking the country from where we were credible and strong as a deterrent force and a force for peace in the world under the Trump administration. And in just a little over 3 short years, we're now the United States is at its weakest it's ever been. There's conflict sprouting up all over the world, the Middle East with the Israeli Gaza and Iranians that are involved in that conflict, and all of their militia forces around the Middle East are involved in that conflict. The Eastern Europe conflict with Ukraine and Russia, and NATO forces arraying themselves supposedly for self-defense. But, a lot of crazy talk is going on that Russia's going to try to come across Western Europe and take over the continent again, like the Nazi Germans did in pre-World War II, and those kind of things. So the reason that's all happening is because the United States is weak, its leadership is weak, it's feckless, and it's not able to provide enough materials to arm itself adequately enough to be a consistent, effective deterrent of the Chinese Communist Party because of all that's going on. And we're putting our resources too much into Ukraine. We're putting our scarce resources into the Middle East to try to help protect Israel and to protect our own forces, that some of which don't even need to be there. And then that leaves Taiwan, our vital national interest ally, has been declared that for decades, that even Democrat presidents have said, yes, we will defend Taiwan if they're attacked by the mainland Chinese. And this very well could be the time. I'm not one to go into predictions, but if I were the Chinese leadership, I would be looking very closely at the window between November 5th and January 2024 and January 20th of 2025, because no matter who wins the election, whether it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden, the United States, in its weakened state and its inability to rally its allies, its inability to be trusted by its allies, and its enemies ignoring it and doing pretty much whatever they want to do for the most part, from a combat mission and a aggressive perspective, are going to be in a weak position. If Joe Biden wins, over half the country is going to think he didn't win again because of what happened in 2020. And if Donald Trump wins, then the administration will be in transition, and Joe Biden's still supposedly in control, which he's really not in control now. And you have this really big window of opportunity that if I were a thinking person and I was in Chinese leadership, I'd look very closely at that opportunity and that window to try to take Taiwan back by force, if that's what my mission has me driving to do. And all indications are that President Xi has even said it himself, prepare for war, to his senior leadership, both in the military and in the civilian part of the communist government there. And that was last year at their big meeting. So they've been preparing for this for a long time. They're really already effectively at war with us. If you've ever read the Unrestricted Warfare by the two People's Liberation Army colonels that was written years ago, you would see that they're at war with us in a non-kinetic way right now, and it wouldn't take another really large step to go the rest of the way if they really want to bring Taiwan in before a Trump administration starts, or if a Biden administration gets elected again. Either way, the United States will be in a weakened position in that window of opportunity.
Well, let's talk about the military. That's your expertise and your background. Biden administration says U.S. military personnel will likely be shot at building the Gaza pier. We touched on this last night. Lloyd Austin in testimony before Matt Gaetz. When this idea came out, I'm like, this is a dumb idea. This is not a good idea. I mean, you're going to go over there and put our guys at risk. And sure enough, they're already being shot at. And Lloyd Austin's like, yeah, they're going to be shot at. But isn't it interesting? They didn't want to declare, he didn't want to say these are boots on the ground. Okay, so it's a pier, which I'm sure is not floating out there on its own. It's anchored to the ground somewhere. What are these guys? Are they rewriting the definition of words again? Boots on the ground?
Well, sure. I mean, they have no ethics in the United States government anymore. I mean, it's across the board in every institution at the federal level. and much of the state levels and local levels, elected officials and appointed officials just don't have any integrity. They don't think that they have to tell the truth to the American people anymore. And Austin, what he really said is that those forces will be engaged in combat with Hamas forces, and he expects it at any time. That's ridiculous. Talk about a dumb idea. It's not only dumb, Brannon, this pier, this port. It's stupid. It's so stupid that more than 100 Americans, I'll make this prediction, more than 100 Americans will be dead over this before it's over. And that's because Lloyd Austin and the teams that he leads are the dumbest people in the United States of America that we could ever field in our defense establishment. They've proven it time and time again. Look at the debacle from Afghanistan. Every general and admiral that's still on active duty, that was on active duty then, that didn't throw their stars on the table and say, no, I'm not going to do this and I'm going to go public, should be fired when Donald Trump wins this election, or whoever wins the next election, because they're not serving the United States of America's vital interest. And they're not most importantly, they're not taking care of the young men and women that are serving in the military under their commands. And their number one job is to make sure those forces are preserved so that they can fight and win our wars, not get sacrificed needlessly because of bad decision making or because they don't have the guts to stand up to whoever's running the office of the President of the United States and tell them, no, we're not going to do this. If you continue down this path, we will resign and you won't have any leaders to run this army. That's what really needs to happen.
Did you know, coming up through your military career, did you know of Lloyd Austin?
Yes. When I was on the Joint Staff, he was a colonel. In the same.
I don't want to pry too much, but did you have an indication then he was lacking in discernment?
Well, from my position, I didn't personally see that, but I talked to a lot of his peers because I worked for them at the colonel level, and they were Army peers. They didn't think very highly of him.
They did not think very highly of him?
No, not at all. And I'm very surprised that he ever made general, let alone 4-star general, and was given a combatant command.
Was he the recipient of affirmative action or DEI or what?
You can decide for yourself based on his performance and the team's performance that he's put on,
Good answer. How about this one? Let's go to this. Let's see here. Where is it? I got another one somewhere, another article I wanted to ask you about. Here we go. Another U.S. precision-guided weapon falls prey to Russian electronic warfare, U.S. says. A U.S. defense official would not provide specifics, but is likely referring to Boeing's ground-launched small diameter, what is that word there?
Small diameter bomb.
The diameter bomb, thank you. My phonics was trying to figure that one out. Bomb. So tell me about this, please. What are your thoughts?
Well, GPS jammers have been pretty common for a while now in the combat zones where the United States has been operating. We use them ourselves. There are different methodologies used, and the small diameter bomb is a GPS guided bomb, whether it's launched from the ground or launched from an aircraft. It works the same way as a joint direct attack munition. You know it as a JDAM. Mm-hmm. The B-1 that I flew on has dropped thousands of them. But if the GPS signal is being jammed for that type of weapon, assuming this SDB was that type of weapon, a GPS-guided weapon, then those jammers, if they're effective, will drive the sensor to where it's not going to impact at the precise target setting that we've got it aimed at.
Are you shocked at the reports that $500 drones by Russia are blowing up $10 million A1 Abrams tanks?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, the Ukrainian armed forces are doing the same thing. They've been forced to use these small first-person view drones that they were able to get, many of them Chinese. They buy Chinese drones through the Ukrainian armed forces, and the Chinese drones are being sold to the Russian armed forces. So China's supplying both sides effectively in that case, and that's changed tank warfare and maneuver warfare on the ground. It's one of the outcomes and consequences of this war between Ukraine and Russia, as we've seen the tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs, using these drones be developed nearly in real time. And it's resulted in seeing vaunted M1 Abrams tanks, Leopard tanks, the Western Army's most valuable asset on the ground battlefield are those types of tanks. They have done amazing work in places like Iraq and really carried the day in both of the conflicts in Iraq where we have fought, the United States has fought, and they're getting killed with these cheap drones that can be bought in numbers because of the type of attacks that they do. They basically, the drones are able to get to the most vulnerable parts of the tanks and drop munitions on them that have the effect of taking them out. And hence you see tanks being drug into Moscow that are M1 Abrams pretty regularly now.
Wow. All right, final question. China's AI-powered satellites imperil U.S. aircraft carriers. This satellite captures detailed images of U.S. naval assets at Norfolk, revealing its advanced surveillance and possible targeting capabilities. Do you want to comment on this before we let you go tonight?
If the image that we're showing on the screen is one of those images from those satellites, it's a synthetic aperture radar image, which can see effectively through most things and make out radar identifiable targets. You can see that. You can see all the way down to the vertical appendages coming up out of the aircraft carriers. Usually these types of radars can get down to 1 foot resolution. It's a high resolution, of course. And, we used to count fence posts with the one that I used in the B-1 bomber. And if you have that sitting on a satellite that's even more powerful and has a better resolution than what I had in the B-1, then you're going to be able to see almost everything that you need to see from a targeting perspective at a place like Norfolk.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Colonel Rob Maness, robmaness.com, robmaness.com. You can catch a show each and every day, an hour-long show at patriot.tv, right, Colonel?
That's right, patriot.tv, 1 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday.
Noon Central.
Absolutely.
See how quick I am?
Yeah, you sure are.
Can't say certain words, but I can.
Hey, tomorrow, Brandon, I'll just tell you, I was supposed to be in Washington, D.C. tomorrow for a meeting of the Defense Advisory Committee on Diversity and Inclusion that the Secretary of Defense created. It's head by an African-American retired Air Force 4-star general named Lester Lyles and a bunch of senior military officers that believe DEI, the way it's supposed to be implemented as a cultural Marxist approach like critical race theory, should be implemented, and are making those recommendations. They were supposed to have a public meeting. About 18 or 17 of us were going to go from organizations all over the country that have been fighting against what DEI is doing to the U.S. military. Well, they canceled the in-person part of the meeting, so we had to cancel our trips. But I'm going to be talking to 2 leaders from STARS that stand together against racism and radicalism in the services. And I'm on the board of advisors for them. We'll have the vice chairman of their board and the president and CEO who are going to be with us as part of that team to talk about the fact that the Department of Defense canceled this in-person meeting because they're afraid. They're afraid the senior officers and enlisted personnel that are fighting against what DEI is doing to the U.S. military were going to be there, and that we weren't going to protest, but that we were just going to be there to ask questions and show a show of force to say, hey, you guys are messing up our military and you're putting our kids in danger, and we're here to say you're wrong about doing it and tell you what you could do to correct this. They didn't want to hear it. They just want they want diversity of skin color. They don't want diversity of thought, no matter what they say. And that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow.
Awesome.
Is how they cancel that.
Pick it up, folks. 1 o'clock Eastern, noon Central. Colonel Maness, patriot.tv. Good for you. Hold their feet to the fire, Colonel.
Absolutely.
Colonel Rob Maness checking in. Check out his show, patriot.tv.